Thank you, Jonathan. Professor Ganor, you're in the room? Not yet, I think. He brought the minister. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, shalom lekulam. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be part of what you called the biggest and best conference in the world, and I try and do my best not to lower the level of your expectations at least. I've been asked to share some insights on the German and thus the European perspective on counterterrorism these days, and I wanted to start with saying, because the main topic was after the Caliphate, that was the title I've been asked to talk to. The question is, are we really after the Caliphate? When people are terrorized to their heart, and that is what terrorism means, and they try to laugh away the risks by doing jokes. And so in Germany we have a series of jokes and they all follow the same pattern, and it always goes like heavy rain floods in northern Germany, ISIS reclaimed responsibility. Traffic accident on the A1, ISIS or Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility. So that is, I think, in reflex to cope with the threat, and it's true that we've seen the loss of territory capability of ISIS, but are we at the end of this threat? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Even though ISIS is greatly weakened, it is obviously capable of adapting its structures and methods. It has come from being a kind of quasi-state to an underground organization able to continue its terrorist activities. It also appears to have retained most of its funding sources and has been able to continue its propaganda activities. At least that's what we see in Germany. And with my speech, and I promise not to be too long, I try to highlight three aspects of what we see these days in Germany, and I think also in Europe. We are, as the minister said, we are seeing more jihadist attacks by lone wolves and self-radicalizers acting on supposedly religious motives. They use everyday objects that can be obtained and used easily, in particular knives and vehicles in Germany. We had the horrible attack on the Berlin Christmas market by the end of 2016. That caused the death of several people and injured an immense number of people seriously. Almost all of these attacks that we've seen are on civilian targets, people going about their daily lives. In short, I want to highlight something on the situation in Germany and three challenges that we have. The situation in Germany, to start with, maybe, we have, and this is only police figures, we have some 770 people that we think pose a potential threat and are ready and able and willing to commit terrorist attacks any moment in Germany. We have some more 470 people who we think are closely related to these attack plannings. Only the criminal police in Germany runs 1,000 investigations at the time as I speak, with more than 1,000 suspects. Since the attacks on the Berlin Christmas market, we think we thwarted at least 4 major attacks, and part of the truth is all of the suspects involved were people who came to Germany claiming asylum status or refugee status. This is one of the aspects I wanted to talk to you about. So, first challenge I wanted to talk to you about is returnees from Syria and other areas, foreign terrorist fighters, as we call them. We have indications that, and I don't want to bore you with figures, but I think it might show you that this is the extent Germany is faced with a threat, and you can then think of how the figures are when you count France and all other countries to that. We currently have indications that more than 1,000 German Islamists or Islamists from Germany have left the country to travel to Syria and or Iraq and fight for or otherwise support the Islamic State or other terrorist groups there. About 1/5 of those who have left the country are women. Most travelers are younger than 30. However, intelligence does not confirm in all cases that the persons really have been in Syria and Iraq and really have participated in fighting. Furthermore, the security authorities have information indicating that at least about 300 children and young people have traveled to Syria, Iraq, most of them with their parents, or they were born there. Most are babies or very young children who are living with their parents. About half of the children and young people were born in the conflict regions. At present, a 3-digit number of minors are residing in these conflict regions or in Turkey. A small number of children and young people have returned to Germany, almost all of them together with their parents, at least their mothers. So far, there is no specific information suggesting that any of these children or young people have taken an active part in fighting, but we want to be prepared. We have information that about 180 persons have died in Syria or Iraq. And we think that about 5,000 of the roughly 40,000 foreign fighters are believed to have come from Europe as a whole. For some of those who have left, there is not enough evidence for the responsible authorities to open investigations, but the security authorities are also not aware of anyone traveling recently to Syria, Iraq, and expect such travel only in individual cases. So obviously the wave has been broken, but we are faced with the problem of the returnees. About 1/3 of the persons who travel to ISIS-controlled territory are now back in Germany. For most of them, we have no reliable information on whether they were actively involved in the fighting in Syria. This is one of our main problems when trying to deal with the situation. What are we trying to do? I mean, it's easy for those that we have proof that they participated in fighting. Those can be taken to court and hopefully convicted. But this is the least great number of them. We have people, loads of people whom we suspect of taking part in terrorist activities, and we try to do our best to monitor these people. We have set up mechanisms, being a federal state, in a share of workload between the state authorities and the federal authorities on who is taking care of whom. But we also have, and I think this is one of the points that I just wanted to highlight to you about the situation in Germany, we also have a substantial number of women, very young children, where we have nothing but a suspicion. Well, it might be easy in the case of a 2-year-old baby, but even if you have a 10-year-old child, we all saw videos of little children having weapons and using them. So how could you tell who poses a threat or not? And in an open and democratic society with limited means to have surveillance of all those people, how would you try to control the situation? We are trying to set up a mechanism with the authorities from the state level, from the federal level, and from the local level to deal with those people, to have some kind of let me put it, a case manager, so that everybody who would come back would be in the hands of somebody saying, okay, what's with you? What is the extent of threat you might pose, or what is the extent of help you might need to reintegrate into our society? That needs the cooperation also of authorities like Child Protective Services, who are really not used in Germany to work together with security agencies. So there's a lot of mutual work that needs to be done. I'm not saying that we are at the end of it, but we at least try to do our best to put that system into place. The second challenge I wanted to talk about is what I said, 4 thwarted attacks, and 4 of them involved refugees. This is not to avoid to be politically incorrect, but it's just, we need to be frank about what's facing our societies. And if you might have followed the news then, but that was a criminal accident. Only last weekend we had in an eastern town in Germany, we had riots on the street because there was a murder. Somebody was stabbed to death by he was the presumed guy who did that. He was of Syrian origin. And that cited mass protests, and this is a real danger to our society, but to other Western societies as well, that cites a wave of right-wing radicalism. So whenever I did counter-terrorism work and counter-Islamist terrorism work, I always thought what we do is, in reality, at least for the German society, we do right-wing prevention, extremism prevention, because of the reaction and counter-reaction that you have in our societies. And I think we cannot take it serious enough, these effects. What we try to learn of it, I think, after 9/11, what we did, and also in Germany, we really were good in enabling the security institutions to work together, and also internationally. But what we learn now is that we have to extend that to the cooperation also of the authorities dealing with foreigners. For example, the Berlin Christmas attack. The guy who committed that, he came from Northern Africa. He was at a very early stage identified as being a potential threat. He wanted to have asylum status that has been refused even in the situation of 2015. You might all remember. He was really very quickly put through the system, and it was rejected that he could claim for asylum. But we couldn't get him out of the country because no country claimed responsibility for him. So we had a suspicion that he was coming from one northern Arabic state, but this state said no. And then there was one moment where we had an idea that he really would be from this state, and this information has not been passed in the right time to the local authority dealing with foreigners, which is really a local authority. So this is the second challenge that we face: how do the information flow from one authority to the other? And you can assume that at the end of this little statement I'm saying it's all about intense cooperation. That at least would be our lesson in counterterrorism. And the third thing I just wanted to mention, this is what the minister also mentioned, that is the increasing role of social media platform in radicalization, and I want to be brief about that. The minister mentioned it. We have a law in Germany trying to impose fines on big internet companies and social media platform companies because we do think they are responsible, or also they share a responsibility in preventing incitement, just as the minister said. And I agree totally that neither Israel nor Germany alone would be able to solve this. I was one of the people who tried to push a legislation. We have a Network Enforcement Act, that's how we call it. And maybe it's just the first try, but I think this is at least one of the ways that we have to go to enable the state to do something with the cooperation of the social media platform companies to work against that. And my experience would be, the minister said, you have a discussion here in Israel, finding the balance between freedom of speech and this kind of approach. And that's very true. But let me share one more thought to the discussion that played a role in our discussions in Germany. And that is, we have the system of the protection of human laws and basic human rights, and it's rights that are granted to the citizen against the state. So the citizen can go to court and say the state is doing something they shouldn't do. They are not allowed to. But what if there is no state? If the population is just faced with social media platform companies, if they start saying what can be cited on a special website or not, and that's what they do. I mean, they contributed in the work, those big firms. They started putting up units saying if this appears on one of our platforms, then it shouldn't be published. It shouldn't be there, and they try to take it away. But for which criteria? Who did it? Who is it who says what can be published on the social media platform? Somebody in a company. And where's the state? No, they are not there. And that's why we say this would lead to a discussion one day that maybe then constitutional courts or whatever would grant then those rights towards enterprises. And that would send a message to the population saying the state no longer is here to protect you. Where is the state? This is the discussion we have in Germany anywhere. Yeah? Is it a weak state or in Western societies? And this is something we can't allow to happen. And that's why I think we should follow up this way. And my experience is also that it helped enhancing the degree of cooperation with the social media platforms, and we should continue this way. So many things to talk about. This is the 3 points that I wanted to add to the discussion. This is 3 aspects that are in Germany under discussion today. And when we talk about counter-terrorism work, it's 3 aspects that I wanted to contribute. I think it all ends up in, again, increase the cooperation between civil institutions like the Child Protective Services, then increase the cooperation with authorities dealing with foreigners, increase the cooperation. This is what we try to do anyway, and that's also why we are here, and thank you for having us.